Namaskar. This is my 54th lecture, or maybe 53rd, because one was spoiled. And I'm going to talk about something that people have been asking me about the reclaiming of temple, Ram Mandir, and so forth. I myself am not a religious person in the traditional sense. Yes, there is a component of spirituality that Tolstoy talks about, that the ecological philosophy and so forth, but I'm not a religious person. So can a non-religious person support the reclaiming of temples and Ram Mandir within India, the Indian subcontinent? Yes, because we can give an explanation that is different from traditional religion. And I'm going to evoke a couple of things here. One is Heidegger, the philosopher. The second one is psychoanalysis, a little bit of psychoanalysis. And also a little bit of non-traditional kind of spirituality. So what is going on? Why am I evoking Heidegger, the German philosopher, to support maybe some reclaiming of temples, especially the important ones like the Ram Lala Mandir? It can be supported by someone who's not traditionally religious. Let's go back to what Heidegger is saying in a very interesting essay on forgetfulness. With Immanuel Kant, who supported the Enlightenment in Europe. What is the Enlightenment? It is about being independent. And he clearly says in his Critique of Pure Reason that we don't need to go beyond where we can go. He drew a boundary. Meaning what? Meaning he says that there are questions that can be answered within human reason. Questions pertaining to mathematics and natural sciences. And we have progressed much more in natural sciences since the time of Immanuel Kant. But then he draws a boundary between what can be rationally known. He calls those the propositions or the sentences in science and mathematics synthetic a priori, which means that they are both universally and necessarily true. They're both synthetic, they increase our knowledge, they are not analytic. What is an analytic sentence? If I say a cat is a cat, it's necessarily true. It will never be false because it's logically true, but it doesn't increase our knowledge. But if I say some cats are black, the word black gives us a predication about the word cat, and it increases our knowledge. But doesn't give us necessary knowledge because it only is based on someone's experience who has seen black cats. According to Kant, science and mathematics give us synthetic a priori knowledge, and hence they should be cultivated. But we have to draw a line when we go to things like, is there a God? Is the human soul survives death? The distinction between mortality and immortality. So he doesn't want to go into that philosophical, metaphysical, ontological questions, because he says we have a natural disposition to ask those, but our brain won't go there. We can't answer those questions. Now, Heidegger says that Heidegger's take is a little different. He's very critical of the European Enlightenment and science and technology, because whereas science and technology has given us a huge knowledge about nature, it enabled us to control nature and improve humans' life. But what we are facing is a question which is very existential. A question about what's our purpose in this universe, because we relate to the universe in a very personal way, not impersonal. Suppose I own, say, a car, And it is a technological object, but for Heidegger, my relationship to the car eventually is very intimate and personal. That's why if someone hits the car, of course, it's inconvenient for me, but I'm also very sad because my relationship is almost like it's not an object, but a personal relationship to me. Similarly, I'm attached to my chair, my table. They have a personal meaning for me. These are existential meanings. Now, what has happened as a result of science and technology is much of the world, we find a rootlessness. Rootlessness, we are searching for the meaning of our existence, and we don't know what it means, because we are, as human beings, our relationship to the world is also very intimate. The tree, the bird that sits on the tree, we can paint it, we can draw it, but again, for us, what do these mean? These are very existential human questions that Heidegger talks about. So let us come back now to the question of temples and reclaiming temples, especially the Ram temple and so forth. Now, in the Hindus and in India, the Indian subcontinent, people of majority faith and minority faith, everyone, they have reached a certain level of selfhood, imposed via the nation state and so forth. And many of them have traveled outside of India for a search for better life. They have migrated and so forth. So India is going through a lot of changes, the people. And there is always this question of who are we? Because none of us want to stay rootless. And that Heidegger calls Dasein. He calls the human being Dasein, not just the human being, because Dasein is the only being who raises question about the meaning of existence, because ultimately none of us are going to be here. And if that is so, excuse me, then the question that arises is, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's my meaning? What's my origin? And this is where we often give meaning to our existence by reclaiming our past, because our past gives us anchorage and identity about who we are. Now, amongst Indians, Hindus, and other Indic religions, it's the temple or the stupa, they carry a very existential meaning. They give me my sense of identity. So, especially important structures like the Rama temple, which is so intimately connected. If you're an Indian, it doesn't matter what your faith is, but you are very much connected to the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata. And these have existential meaning, very intimate meaning. What gives meaning to my life? My children, my family. It's the same thing with these structures. They give us a very intimate meaning, something, forgetfulness. This is something that Heidegger talks about. We forget to ask the central questions, what is the meaning of our existence? And in ruins, he says this, we find those meanings. People visit ruins, they visit architecture, they find the meaning of their own existence. And this is probably what is going on with reclaiming the ancient structures. That's our rootedness, of the Dasein, the forgetfulness. Remember, according to Heidegger, Dasein, which is actually the human being, is a very interesting thing. He exists in space and time. He's very limited. We are very limited because we will confront death, all of us. We are not immortal. But we are the only beings who can raise questions about our own existence. A table or a chair or a tree does not raise question meaning about its own existence. What does it mean? So the Ram temple, which is an iconic structure, it's a very existential, it gives meaning to our existence, our identity. It gives meaning to who we are, and that's the whole question of reclaiming these structures. One doesn't have to be religious. One can just do some psychoanalysis. Why do people go to therapy? There are things that come out in therapy from early childhood, which gives meaning to the way I experience the external world, the way I relate to other people. There is a thing called transference in psychoanalysis, and important figures from the past, we impose it on the therapist. Say we are very angry with our dads, we impose that on our therapist. He becomes the dad figure for us. It's the same thing. We can't actually go back to the past by reclaiming temples, especially Ram Temple, which is so important. It's a cultural icon. So one doesn't have to be religious per se. One doesn't even have to be believing in God. One can be an atheist but still claim that identity, because that's very intimate to all of us. And that's the meaning of reclaiming. Now the question is, how much do we reclaim? Do we go around and reclaim everything, all the land that we have lost, all the temples? It is not possible to do that, to go and reclaim everything, just as it is not possible in therapy to go back and redo or undo all the past good memories and bad memories. We all have good memories as a child. We can't reclaim, we can't relive that. But especially in India, in a place which is so steeped in culture, mythology, and I don't like that word, but I'm saying that in poetry, music, Ramayana, Mahabharata, this reclaiming the past gives them a sense of rootedness in their forgetfulness of the past. When we forget our past, we lose our identities. We lose our sense of self. Is it possible to reclaim all the temples? No, it's financially not possible. It's not feasible. It's a long process because we're going through court systems. The best is if, without any conflict, they're given back. But that's not going to happen because others claim their identity in a different way. Maybe they claim their identity through the invaders who destroyed it. So it's also a conflict between identities. If they give back, well and good. If they're not, it's not possible to reclaim everything. It's a very costly process. And it's tedious. But it is possible to reclaim some. But my point in this whole lecture is to show that one can be an atheist, a non-believer in God. One need not be religious. But one still can support reclaiming some of these structures, which gives the sign. The sign of forgetfulness, a purpose and meaning of existence. Remember, Heidegger was writing at a time when the First World War has happened and Germany went through a lot. And then the Second World War, there's a whole trauma in between. And also the favor was coming back of reclaiming the past. It's the same thing here. It's a human, we have to understand this through human questions. Whether God exists or not, I mean, that's a very difficult metaphysical question. I'm not going there. But one doesn't have to be religious. One doesn't have to be a believer or a theist, but can still support the reclaiming of the important sacred spaces. And the question of Ramlala exists just there. The sign, the only being, according to Heidegger, who can raise meaning about the question of his existence. And sometimes forgetfulness about our past, who we are, search for our identity. And that was the main point of my lecture in response to many who have asked me, what is your take on the reclaiming of temples, especially the Ram Temple? That's all for this lecture. Please look out for my course on genocide. It's there, it's all over the social media, and it's going to start on January 4th. Thank you, namaskar.